All right, so I got some pretty wild updates here for you guys coming out of the United Kingdom in the aftermath of Queen Elizabeth II officially passing away, which is something I haven't actually had the chance to discuss on this channel yet. So I'll give you my thoughts on that generally here in a second. But here from Common Dreams, Julia Conley, she's reporting that apparently there have been some pretty significant crackdowns by British authorities against people who have decided to exercise free speech and go and voice their concerns with the monarchy or protest the existence of the crown and the royal family. Or in some of these cases, we had people getting arrested for just like mildly critiquing individual members within this family. So we're going to get into some of the details here. But first, since I haven't had a chance to discuss the queen officially passing on this channel yet, honestly, my take on it is that I don't really give a shit that she died. I'm not typically in favor of people like openly celebrating people's deaths, but at the same time, I'm not going to do any hand wringing about that. I don't really care if people want to make light of it or want to make memes about it, or want to voice their concerns about her complicity in the role of the British Empire in wielding incredible amounts of violence against millions and millions of people around the world. I think that, again, she is a relic of the past. She is a relic of something that we should have left back in the 19th and 20th centuries. And so, at the end of the day, people are going to say what they're going to say. And I certainly believe that people have the right to go out and express their disdain for this institution, or even for the queen specifically, or the current king who is now taken over in the aftermath of her death. So with that being laid out there, let's go ahead and get into some of the details here. She says, free expression advocates in the United Kingdom are warning that law enforcement agents in the country appear ready to eliminate Britain's right to free speech, as several arrests have been reported at events taking place during the 10-day nationwide mourning period following Queen Elizabeth II's death. And there were some other things that I saw floating around online in association with this mourning period, which are just kind of like absolutely insane and bizarre to me. So here was just one example of that from The Guardian. They say hospital appointments and funerals canceled for the Queen's funeral. Okay, you're canceling hospital appointments and funerals. What the fuck does that even mean? You're going to put other people's lives, their treatments, their illnesses just on standby because this 98, 99-year-old queen just happened to finally die? I mean, what the fuck are you guys doing over there? This to me is just completely beyond the pale. I mean, imagine if a U.S. president died or something like that, and we just shut down a lot of our hospitals. We shut down. There's another example of like a food bank that was shut down, and then they had a lot of backlash, so they reneged on that decision. But that in and of itself to me is just absolutely bizarre, that you would just shut down the entire functioning of your country over the queen, over a monarch who, again, I think is, represents an institution that should have been abolished a long time ago. But they continue here saying that critics of the monarchy have been arrested, detained, and forced to leave public areas, as well as intimidated by police officers in Scotland and London, as Queen Elizabeth's coffin has traveled across the UK, along with members of the royal family, including King Charles III, Mr. Sausage Fingers. But they continue saying that the first arrest was reportedly made in Oxford, where Simon Hill asked who elected him. Who elected him? Okay, the answer to that is nobody fucking elected this guy. That's what a monarchy is. So obviously he's asking this question in jest and trying to make the point that, this is somebody who is reaping the benefits of taxpayer dollars. Just as a reminder here, it's not as if they are, just sitting on their own wealth that they have accumulated through years of hard work. No, a lot of that wealth was straight up looted from various countries around the world. Just as an example, in India alone, it is estimated that the British Empire stole roughly $45 trillion from just that one single country, and a lot of the other wealth is coming in the form of $100 million per year in taxpayer funds. And of course they in addition to that, bend the laws surrounding the monarchy to the point where now this new King Charles is going to be inheriting the Queen's $500 million fortune without paying an inheritance tax that the rest of the people in this country would be subjected to under the same conditions. So again, circling back to this question of who elected him, nobody elected him, but apparently you can't even ask that question or float that sentiment out there without being potentially arrested. They say that he said this as a proclamation officially naming Charles as his mother's successor was read, and Hill reported that police officers placed him in handcuffs and eventually told him that he'd been arrested under the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022, which has been condemned by rights advocates. So I didn't really know what this law was initially, so I just figured I'd pull it up on Wikipedia and give like a very rudimentary, readout in terms of what this law is actually talking about here that could somehow possibly give a justification for arresting somebody for literally just asking who elected this guy, when the answer to that is that nobody elected that guy. But just a little bit of details on this specific policy here, which is absolutely wild. They say the act gives the Home Secretary broad powers to make regulations without reference to Parliament and to decide on the type of protest deemed acceptable or unacceptable by the state. They say the act implements a recommendation by the Law Commission to introduce a statutory offense of public nuisance and abolish the existing common law offense. They say this will provide clarity to the police and potential offenders, giving clear notice of what conduct is forbidden. But they say the maximum penalty for this offense is 10 years imprisonment, and the new law also allows senior police officers to give directions and impose conditions, including beginning and end times of protests. You could just have random arbitrary cops out there with some seniority saying, oh, we don't like that this protest is like going later into the night or something, or, it's too early in the morning for us to wake up and go deal with this. So we're just deciding to arbitrarily limit the extent of time that you are able to go out and protest, which, again, if the police, similar to how they did here in the United States during the 2020 summer Black Lives Matter protests, I mean, I experienced this on a firsthand basis when I was here in Atlanta at one of those protests. I mean, if you give cops the ability, as we have again here in the United States as well as in Britain apparently, if you give them the ability to just arbitrarily set the parameters of how and when people are allowed to protest, especially in the case here where it was a protest against the police, then they're just going to go out and use that as an opportunity to confine the boundaries of when people are supposed to be able to exercise their right to protest, supposed to be able to exercise their right to free speech, which the whole point of having those rights is that they're not supposed to be bound within the confines of whatever the fuck some police officer or whatever the fuck the government happens to like at that specific moment. The whole point is that you're supposed to be able to make people uncomfortable. You're supposed to be able to do it in whatever capacity that you want, as long as you are not, wielding violence against other people or like damaging people's property or things like that. But I saw this firsthand in Atlanta where you had an entirely peaceful protest and then the cops would come out there on a bullhorn and would basically just say to the crowd, we have said that there is a mandatory curfew now that's taking place at 8 p.m. or whatever, and you have to disperse this protest and go home by that time, and then if you don't meet that standard, they then proceed to use violent force against the protesters, and that's exactly what happened in Atlanta, where that was the first time I ever ended up getting tear gassed. But that in and of itself, I think, is a completely ridiculous provision. They say it also allows them to impose limitations or conditions on those organizing or taking part in either a procession or assembly that the police decide are necessary to prevent disorder, damage, disruption, noise impact, or intimidation. Okay, kind of the whole point of protesting is that there is a little bit of disorder, there is a little bit of disruption, and there's definitely going to be a little bit of noise that is taking place in these protests. Basically, what this law seems to be reading like is that unless you're basically just doing a like state-sanctioned parade through a city, and even those might not meet some of these conditions, but unless you basically aren't really doing a protest and you're just having like a peaceful parade, then you're not allowed to go out and protest. So this is just completely fucking insane to me, defeating the actual purpose of what protests are supposed to be for, which is to make the public uncomfortable. It is to raise awareness by causing disruption to the typical order of things. But they say the law is controversial and led to protests under the slogan "Kill the Bill" in various British cities before it came into force, and it has received fierce criticism both locally and internationally by various politicians, human rights groups, journalists, and academics due to the impact on free expression, freedom of speech, and the right to protest in the United Kingdom. So that bill, I'm assuming it was passed under Boris Johnson, who is now obviously out of office, but he's been replaced by Liz Truss, who is no better than him and honestly probably worse than him on a number of different fronts. So this law is in all likelihood, I would assume, probably going to stand, but it's completely fucking insane and authoritarian and definitely a suppression of free speech rights for everybody living in this country. But they continue here in this Common Dreams article saying that Hill wrote that he was never given a clear answer as to why he had been arrested, but was told his comments in Oxford could have led to harassment or distress. Okay, so again, going back to what this law is outlining here, basically it seems like if you were going out there holding up a sign or shouting something that might be like perceived to be offensive to somebody else who's in the general vicinity or who you're talking about, then you're not allowed to say it. I mean, what does this even mean? It's harassment or distress. It's going to lead to harassment and distress to other people for saying who elected him. I mean, really, this is the ridiculous situation that we are actually describing here. But they continue down here with another example saying, a demonstrator holding a handmade sign reading, "Not My King," was also filmed being led away by police from the Palace of Westminster in London on Monday, and climate campaigner and lawyer Paul Powsland reported that he attracted negative attention from a police officer when he held up a blank sheet of paper in Parliament Square, and the officer warned him that if he wrote "Not My King" on the paper, he would be arrested under the Public Order Act because someone might be offended. Okay, so the cop is literally saying someone might be offended. I'm sorry, what the fuck? These people are going to make me come out here and sound like I'm like a reactionary right-wing person right now. Okay, somebody might be offended. Are you fucking out of your mind? Okay, the entire point of having freedom of speech, the entire point of having a freedom of protest is so that you are able to go offend people. It's not that you don't have freedom of speech. You don't have any freedom of protest or assembly if anybody can just say, oh, well, that protest, this specific one that, happens to be part of my political opposition or an opposition to the state, if I just don't like that, I can just come out and say, oh, that might be offensive to me, and then, officers go arrest all of those people participating in it. That is just completely fucking insane as a justification here. But again, even the context is more insane than just what he was saying there, because this guy hadn't even written anything on a piece of paper. Okay, he was holding up a blank sign, and even that was enough for the cop to go out there and basically imply that he was like, being a disorder or being a public nuisance or something like that. Completely fucking ridiculous. But they continue down here with a little bit more information in terms of other pushbacks that have happened as a result of a lot of these arrests. Of course, you had the member of Parliament and former Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn, who was calling the arrests of the anti-monarchy protesters wrong, anti-democratic, and an abuse of the law. He's 100% correct. While Zara Sultana, who I've also covered on this channel recently, another Labour MP, expressed shock that Britain's right to speak out against the monarchy is being debated, and that's a tweet that she sent out there. She said, "No one should be arrested for just expressing Republican views. Extraordinary and shocking that this needs saying." They continue with another example here, saying that in Edinburgh, a 22-year-old student named Marianne Gela was arrested after holding up a sign that read, "Fuck imperialism, abolish monarchy," something that you absolutely should be able to fucking say in any context whatsoever, outside St. Giles Cathedral, where the Queen's coffin was laying before being taken to London. And she told Open Democracy that she was detained in a cell for 9 hours, and that the officers who arrested her later expressed doubts over whether the arrest was lawful, and she was nevertheless charged with behavior likely to cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm. Okay, the law. Okay, she's saying this is what the actual specific charge was: behavior likely to cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm, because she held up a sign. Really? I mean, that's what's going on over here. She held up a sign that said, "Fuck imperialism, abolish the monarchy." I mean, this would be like if you went to the United States and you went to one of these, BLM protests a couple years ago, where they were doing mass arrests that were completely unjustified for many other reasons as well. But, the idea that, like, here in the United States, where I think we have much broader free speech protections, at least for the moment, obviously, conservatives and even some liberals are trying to erode a lot of those free speech rights. But, the idea that, like, I would not be able to go out and, hold up a sign that says, "Fuck imperialism, abolish the police," that to me is completely insane and obviously, authoritarian and undemocratic and completely averse to anything resembling free speech. But this is the justification they're giving: behavior likely to cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm. Fear or alarm because somebody else held up a sign that they might find, mildly offensive here. But they continue saying that also in Edinburgh, videos posted on social media appeared to show a protester being removed from a crowd by officers and arrested after shouting, "You're a sick old man," at Prince Andrew, who is, I don't know if you guys know this, verifiably a sick old man. Okay, this is the same guy who has been accused of raping Virginia Giuffre, a woman who was allegedly sex trafficked by financier Jeffrey Epstein, and he has denied this allegation, but has paid a settlement to this woman, Virginia Giuffre, earlier this year. And oh, by the way, there is some scandal surrounding the specifics of how exactly he paid this off. It was a multi-million-dollar settlement here with like $16.3 million going to Virginia. And there's some questions there about whether or not the Queen was using some of her funds, which again have been looted from around the world as well as taken directly from British taxpayers, and she could have potentially been using some of those funds to basically pay off, and help to cover up the fact that this guy Prince Andrew is an absolute fucking creep. So again, you have another example here of a guy being arrested for saying you're a sick old man. I mean, could you imagine that if we were not allowed to go out and heckle Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or something, and even people who have been like confirmed as sex pests in this country, and you're not allowed to go out there and just point that out, or not even point that out specifically, but just generally yell out things that are averse to something that they would be might be offended by or something like that. Completely fucking insane. But I guess this is the current state of the free speech laws that are happening over in the United Kingdom. I mean, this type of shit sometimes makes me look back and say, like, okay, maybe we do have some good things here in the United States in terms of our Constitution. I think that the, obviously the First Amendment is absolutely fantastic. We talk about that all the time in regards to censorship from social media platforms and other situations as well. But, this is a situation where you need a goddamn First Amendment, right? I mean, if you don't have the ability to go and hold up signs that say, fuck imperialism, abolish the monarchy, if you don't have the ability to yell out at political representatives like Prince Andrew and say you're a sick old man when this is somebody who was literally paid a settlement for raping somebody, okay, if you're not allowed to go out there and say not my king to somebody who was a relic of this era in the 18th and 19th and 20th centuries, one of the most violent colonial eras in the history of humanity, and you're not even allowed to go give a mild critique of them or hold up a sign in peaceful protest of the monarchy's existence, then I don't know how you pretend that you even have any remaining resemblance of free speech or ability to assemble and to protest the government, which is obviously core to having a functioning democracy.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying